Hi everyone, Anthony Fantano here, internet's busiest music nerd. I hope you're doing well. And it's time for a review of the new Olivia Rodrigo record, Sour. The pop world's new it girl is finally here, Olivia Rodrigo, delivering quickly on the promise of a debut LP after the meteoric rise of her 2021 single, Driver's License, which is an unusual hit but not an unlikely one. Sure, it may be a dramatic, forlorn, and extravagantly produced piano ballad, but in a world of Adele's and Lewis Capaldi's, it feels like we need a placeholder for this kind of song exactly every 6 months or so. So thanks to this track filling that void and hitting it really big, Rodrigo's success has seemingly been overnight, but she is not exactly new to the industry. She's also a trained singer who spent years as a Disney actress, not just on the show Bizaardvark, but in the High School Musical series too. And before you hit the comments being like, industry plant, like, keep in mind, the Disney 2 pop industry pipeline is pretty well established at this point. There are loads of beloved pop stars that come from places like the Mickey Mouse Club. And on top of that, the actors and actresses who fill these roles more often than not are falling into obscurity after the job is done. Just because you have a role on a Disney show doesn't mean you're just instantly handed a record contract the moment it's over. But I am sure being in one section of the entertainment industry makes transitioning into another easier to a degree. That is most definitely a privilege not everyone gets. But if Olivia's singles have proven anything so far, it's that she has the vocal chops to back up her success. But what about the rest of Sour? This thing is 11 tracks and 35 minutes. It is very trim, relatively low BS, and the central theme on these tracks is young love on the rocks, heartbreak, which seem to be oriented around a very specific relationship and time in Olivia's life. You could call it a breakup record for Zoomers who had a year of prime, reckless romanticism ripped away from them by a deadly pandemic. One other thing about this record, though, it is so 2021, which maybe for some people might seem like a non-description, but this record genuinely sounds like the result of the musical trends of the past 10 years just simmering in a playlisted stew on the internet. You have touches of those sad big-budget piano ballads I mentioned earlier, grandiose millennial pop, Taylor Swift, Lorde, bedroom pop, lo-fi, even a bit of pop-punk too, all weirdly finding common ground on this potent expression of teenage woe. And if Sour is great at translating anything, it's that. Which maybe doesn't seem like a huge feat considering Rodrigo is a teenager, but no, what's actually impressive is I think her compelling voice as well as lyrics make that experience instantly relatable to anyone outside that sphere who's willing to lend sympathy to the narrative she's trying to pull together here. Because this record does hold one truth as universal, and that's that being a teenager still kind of sucks ass. But Sour doesn't boil down to simply that, nor is it just a random smattering of songs that are like, I broke up with this guy, he sucks, I hate him, For sure, Sour is kind of a scant record, and Olivia doesn't exactly come across as a seasoned songwriter, but still, many of the songs on this LP do come together to form a very cohesive breakup narrative, from the introductory themes of Brutal to the feelings of longing and betrayal following in the tracks immediately after. And then sort of reaching a place of semi-closure with moments like Happiness. It would be one thing if every single song here were just delivering these breakup abstractions that were so non-specific that you couldn't tie them to any one experience or person. But no, Rodrigo is actually 7 stages of griefing this whole ordeal out. So at least conceptually, there is a bit more to Sour than might meet the eye, but is the music actually good? Well, speaking for myself and myself only, I was pleasantly surprised. I dug the pounding rock riffs and drums on the opener Brutal, which, like, yeah, aren't exactly at an Idol's level of intensity, but they're still pretty raw and wild for a pop record. Certainly gutsier than anything off that Machine Gun Kelly LP. I think I've used the word conviction already in this review, but I'll use it again here, saying there is a lot of that in her vocal performance here, as she comes to this young adult realization that life actually just sucks. And in a way, I think this LP serves as how Matrix-like that experience can be. Following this, we immediately crash with no survivors into piano tunes and heartbreak on the track Traitor, which is not only a beautiful tune but serves as a reminder of how uncaring and volatile teenage love can be. Being played, being manipulated, and being broken up with so your ex can go date another person just a few weeks later. There's almost a Swiftian quality to the vocals and the chord progression on this track too, but because of Swift's influence on this track and the grandiose production, Rodrigo is miles ahead of where she was at this age. Which is obviously not a dig to piss off the Swifties. This is merely just a result of Taylor Swift kind of paving the way, and this is clearly an influence that Rodrigo wants fans to notice as she interpolates a piece of New Year's Day on the track One Step Forward, Three Steps Back. Following this, we have the track Driver's License, which I wasn't crazy about on the lyricism end the first time I heard it, stating things like, I guess you didn't mean what you sung about in that song about me, just warrants a bit of an eye roll. But still, there are some stunning vocals on this track. The production is immaculate. The strings, the pianos, the everything. And you know what? There is something narratively clever about tying this heartbreaking, traumatic experience to something that for a long time has been a rite of passage for so many American teenagers, and that's learning to drive. The schoolyard melodies that top the bridge of this track too were a kind of clever incorporation. Look, I'll say there was more to say about the track than I originally thought. One Step Forward, Three Steps Back is a very hushed piano ballad. It may not be a grandiose moment on the LP instrumentally, but it is kind of vital to the progression of the record narratively. We see Rodrigo here in a moment where she's trying to reach out, maybe smooth things over, or find some kind of personal closure, but instead that kind of blows up in her face. We have a portrayal of that, but also shots of what seems like a relationship that feels like it may be progressing in one moment, but then backsliding in the next. Either way, things on this track seem like they're just moving into unsalvageable territory, with all of this being expressed in a moment of very quiet heartbreak and suffering. There's almost a Regina Spektor-like quality to the pianos and vocals on this track too. There is also Deja Vu, which I loved as a single and I still enjoy in the midst of this record. It's a grand cinematic pop anthem with mid-fi wailing lead melodies and drums. There's a versatile array of aesthetics and textures through the track which serve as a foundation for Rodrigo to portray her ex's new relationship as just deja vu to the relationship they had, almost like he's just moving through the motions. Oh, you're having ice cream. Oh, you're playing piano. Oh, you're listening to Billy Joel. With the song Good For You, we have similar themes playing out over driving, rowdy rock riffs. Here, emotionally, we see Rodrigo shifting from sad to angry, which ultimately for the narrative of this story is good. I think that you can't really get over something that makes you sad with at least having an angry moment where you're mad at the thing, or you're mad at the thing that took away what you're sad about. So then hopefully you can have that internally explosive moment and then reach a point of acceptance that it's over, it's gone, it's done. And while instrumentally I did feel like this track was a bit of a hodgepodge when I first heard it, what I do appreciate about it is that whether it's a sad piano ballad, an acoustic guitar, or something more punk influence like this, Rodrigo's voice just seems to fit the bill. Enough for You is another angry, Swiftian moment on the LP, backed with acoustic guitars. I came away from this one impressed by the continuation of the narrative, Rodrigo's vocal performance, but stylistically I found it to be kind of derivative. And therein lies the issue with this LP on the back end, because musically and instrumentally, I think Rodrigo and her main producer here start to run thin on ideas, as the song Happier is just a painfully bland piano ballad in 3/4, which again, the only saving grace of this track is just how bitter the vocals and lyricism come off. Then Favorite Crime is yet another very bland acoustic cut with an unmemorable chord progression. Thankfully, the track Jealousy changes gears big time. The blaring vocals, punchy beats, and heavy piano notes sound like a combination of a 90s singer-songwriter hit, and maybe just a dab of Trent Reznor, especially as the pianos become kind of dissonant and detuned in a few passages. Then there's also a thematic shift happening on this track where we have more focus on just general beauty-based jealousy and body image issues. Then the closing track, Hope You're Okay, shimmers instrumentally throughout with lots of nuanced layers of acoustic guitars and keys. And lyrically, Rodrigo pens some thoughtful lyrics about LGBTQ people in her life that she had known that suffered through periods of rejection, discrimination, and hoping that as they transitioned out of her life, they moved on to better things. Talking about being proud of them for being themselves and living their lives according to their orientation and their truth. And yes, it may be another low-key moment on this LP, but the storytelling is at least engaging, the instrumentation is pretty cinematic and entrancing. But with that being said, there are some overarching flaws to this LP I'd like to address. One, the relationship narrative much of this project is buried in is not quite as detailed or as point-to-point as it could be. In fact, as I kind of just said, it trails off into other topics entirely on the back end. And on numerous tracks that focus on this narrative, we continually cycle through like the same descriptors of this whole situation, most notably like how long it took this person to transition from you to the next girlfriend. But with that being said though, I will say for this LP, the hype is real. The songs are kind of there, the vocals are most definitely there, the production much of the time is there. It's clear Olivia has some room to grow and develop her own sound and direction and style, but Sour shows there's enough baseline talent here to carry Olivia over into another LP where hopefully she's getting a bit more ambitious with the sound she's delivering and approaching, how deeply she digs into the narratives that she's pulling together. There were certainly a couple tracks on the back end that showed that she could dive into other topics too. So feeling a strong 6 to a light 7 on this one. Tran. Zishin, have you given this album a listen? Did you love it? Did you hate it? What would you rate it? You're the best, you're the best. What should I review next? Hit the like if you like. Please subscribe and please don't cry. Hit the bell as well. Over here next to my head is another video that you can check out. Hit that up or the link to subscribe to the channel. Anthony Fantano, Olivia Rodrigo, forever.